Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Colt Bush from Biopac. I'll be your moderator on today's webinar, Computer-Aided Physiology Fundamentals for Successful Student Labs. Before we dive in, I do have some housekeeping I need to cover. All attendees are muted, so please submit your questions and comments to the GoToWebinar control panel. That's where you communicate with me, your moderator. When the webcam is turned on, if it looks a little small to you, you can just drag that gray bar down and it'll enlarge or shrink, whatever you want to do. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll send each of you a link once the recording is done being processed. And finally, we will have a survey at the end of the webinar, so please complete it so we have your feedback and ideas. Now on to our presenter. Jasmine Anderson is the Biopac Student Lab product manager. She previously served as the Midwest Regional Account Manager and has a lot of great Biopac experience. Prior to joining Biopac Systems, Jasmine taught undergraduate laboratory courses and received training in active learning strategies for STEM. Today, she works on educational solutions that engage and excite students while streamlining the teaching process. Welcome, Jasmine.
Hi, thank you, Colt.
All right, let's make you presenter and get into it.
All right. Well, thank you for attending my webinar today, Computer-Aided Physiology Fundamentals for Successful Student Labs. So before we get started, I'll provide some background information for those of you who aren't familiar with Biopac Systems yet. So we're a proven leader in research and teaching solutions for physiology. We've been in business for 27 plus years now, and 99% of the top 100 universities use Biopac products. And with researchers around the world, you can also find over 40,000 citations stating Biopac systems. Our teaching line, which we'll be discussing today, Biopac Student Lab, has also been repeatedly ranked first in its class. In 2017, we were ranked #1 by HAPS, and we're very proud of that. So on our agenda today, we have a lot to cover. First off, we're going to start with the fundamentals of computer-aided physiology systems. Then we're going to dive into the logistics and types of resources you need to require these types of labs. We'll have kind of a best practices, tips and tricks for facilitating computer-aided physiology labs. And of course, we'll save some time at the end for an audience question and answer session. So now before we get started, we're going to pause for a quick poll. So you can carry this away, Colt.
Yeah, so we just wanted to see how proficient people are with computer-aided physiology systems. You can just select one.
Yeah, and answers are listed in increasing order of proficiency from novice to expert. So let us know where you kind of land within that range.
All right, so most of the responses coming in are either advanced beginner or competent. I'll hand it back to you.
All right, thank you. Perfect. So the first section is going to be fundamentals of computer-aided physiology systems. So when you're looking at computer-aided physiology systems, across the board, they almost always have these three components that are integrated together, and that's the hardware that's going to help you, record the signal, software that's going to let you visualize that signal and analyze it, and then of course you need lessons for your students to run and follow along, which really, provide that learning experience. And it's nice if there is like a hard copy or digital manuals available. With our system, Biopac Student Lab, you can see the platform and software and manual on the right-hand side. Now, also to record that signal, you're going to need lead sets and transducers, and these are typically specific to the signal type. So whether you're recording ECG, EEG, EMG, EOG, EDA, pulse, airflow, respiratory effort, the list goes on. There's different accessories that you can use to record these signals, and those all attach to your hardware platform. There's also different experiments that kind of combine these for more advanced approach, and you can look at physiological responses like dive reflex, biofeedback, and startle response. So what are data acquisition systems? So these are the computer-aided physiology systems, and they're also commonly referred to as DACs, and that means digital analog converter. And so what is this big picture? What are we looking for? What are we actually measuring? How do we measure it? And how do we record that information? So analog to digital converters actually measure the electrical activity from the body. And you can do this by measuring the potential between different points. So for example, if you want to look at the electrical activity of the heart, you'll most commonly place some electrodes around the heart in a lead-to configuration, and then that gets you the signal, the ECG signal you can see on the right-hand side. Another example of this would be electromyography or EMG. So EMG is a measure of the electrical activity coming from muscles. Once again, to record that, you're going to place electrodes around that muscle of interest, and then you can get that EMG signal. That measurement can be useful for a wide range of different applications, looking at physical responses of a stimulus, or even looking at performance or fatigue of that muscle over time. Now, another thing to consider when you're looking at computer-aided physiology systems is you want to make sure that it has high sampling rate, and it has this is important so that you can really visualize everything that's going on and have a clear picture of the data that you're collecting. So sampling rate is the number of samples that the system is collecting from the body per second, and it's in units hertz. So on the right-hand side, we can kind of see how this is displayed. And if you see those dots along the ECG waveform, imagine each of those dots is a sample. Now, if you connected between each dot, you can see that we missed that QRS peak. And that's if you have a low sampling rate. So that's when you're not able to capture all of the information. And you can imagine your students might be a little concerned if they were recording their physiology and missed that QRS peak. Did their heart stop? So you want to make sure that you have high sampling rate, which you can see in the final picture there, a series of dots, multiple samples every second. With our system, there's an aggregate of 400,000 samples per second, and 100,000 per each signal that you're recording out of the four. And so that relatively high sampling rate can really give you a better visualization, clearer picture of those electrical potentials. Now, different signals also kind of, some are faster and some are slower, and the sampling rate can also be dictated by that. There's different recommendations for these sampling rates, but what's nice is if you pick a system that has all of these preset for you. So of course you can just jump into the learning and you don't have to worry, okay, I'm recording ECG, did I set the sampling rate at least 200 or 1,000 hertz for HRV. With Biopac Student Lab, it's really nice because all of this is dictated for you. So once you get started, you never really have to worry, about changing your sampling rate. Another feature that you want to look for in computer-aided physiology systems are universal amplifiers. And amplifiers are what is going to be pretty much amplifying that signal. So as you can imagine, these signals coming from the body are relatively small, and we need to make them a lot bigger so we can see them on our computer screen. Universal amplifiers allow you to record any type of signal. So you could record ECG from one amplifier or channel input, and you can see these here on the front of the MP unit, our computer-aided physiology system, and they can work with any type of accessory. So it's really nice because it lets you mix and match your different systems. So kind of getting into the safety side of things, when considering a computer-aided physiology system, isolation is incredibly important. It's really a must-have. And this is a safety standard from IEC 60601, and what that means is it allows for human-safe recordings. This is important because these systems are using power that comes from the wall, and you're also putting electrodes on the subject. So you want to make sure that you're never going to accidentally, shock your student or your subject. And that's exactly what isolation provides. So always make sure that your system is fully isolated. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, but what about labs that require stimulation? Maybe you're in a lab that wants to look at nerve conduction velocity, or you have some other type of psychophysiology paradigm that would use a pain stimulus like a shock in it. And for that, we also have human-safe solutions if you need to elicit those types of shocks. So as you can see here, this is our human-safe stimulator, and it's really a nice tool for students because we have the anode and the cathode where the shock's coming from in a set distance. And so that makes sure that your students are, just shocking a shorter segment. One thing you want to avoid is you don't want your students to put, electrodes that are going to be eliciting a shock around their heart, for example, or in their mouth. And so this allows a tool, that's a tool for this. There's also another system if you need to adjust the shock more. So if you want to change, the level or the intensity, and that all plugs into the analog output. And the analog output is really nice because you can have these additional, capabilities like hooking up a stimulator to your system. So remember that when considering these. Another way to stimulate, of course, that happens in labs is sometimes you might want to use audio or visual stimulation, especially if you're running a lesson looking at Stroop effect or pre-pulse inhibition of startle, for example. And to run these lessons, you'd have that audio or visual stimulus occur, and you can also sync that in with the system. So you get this digital pulse that shows every time you're showing the audio or visual stimulation. And of course, you can see how the physiology is reacting because of that, which is a really nice tie-in. And to run those labs, typically professors will use ePrime or SuperLab software. And this is also great for students because these software packages are also heavily used in research and in industry. So it kind of preps them for types of software that they'll use later down the road. Now, these stimulus presentation programs all use a digital I/O port, and having a computer-aided physiology system that has that type of port is really nice because it adds more flexibility. It also gives you some opportunities to interface with virtual reality. And of course, that added flexibility just kind of future-proofs your lab because you can create a lot of different, more unique lessons down the road. Now, when you're having software with your system, you also want to make sure that it's easy to download and easy to distribute, whether you are using the systems in lab or you're having the systems used, remotely, the students at home. With Biopac Student Lab, you'd receive a postcard with your system, and that will direct you to a link to download the software. We also have special, like a card behind that kind of gives you all the information you need to know about, unzipping the installer and downloading it. So when you need to download the software, that's just done from our website, which makes it really easy to do wherever you are. You navigate to that specific link, and then you can either download for Windows or Mac. Now, if you're the instructor, you can also download the instructor guide and answer guide. And if you're using one of our remote systems, so that is you're having your students download the software at home and you're sending one of our BSL home packages with the students so they can do the labs remotely. Of course, you don't want them to see the instructor and answer guide. So they have a different link that they can download, and it gives them Mac or Windows version. Also, just a note, if you are using one of those remote systems, make sure that you keep that software card in them if you're redistributing it between students, or just simply scan it and post it on your learning management system, so it's in an easy place for everyone to find. Another facet that we have to our software is our review saved data version. And this is free to everyone and is available to download online. And you don't even have to be a Biopac Student Lab user to take advantage of it. With this free version of the software, you can analyze data, but you can also review lesson intros, procedures, look at sample data, and different videos of students running our lessons. If you are recording your own data in the lab, you can also open that up and analyze it. And this is great because students can practice their data analysis, they can do their analysis from home, and it's also a good way to have students make up labs by analyzing either the data that you recorded in lab or from the sample data. Now, if you're interested in that, you can also download that from our website. You can, and if you're having students use it to analyze data that was already recorded in your lab, just make sure that they download the software version that matches the one that you have in your lab. So you can find out which software version you're using by going to the help menu and clicking about BSL, and you'll see that we have all of those different versions to download on our website. See highlighted in that red box there. Of course, as an instructor, especially when you're putting, the systems in the hands of your students, if you're working remotely, it's always nice to have additional resources at hand. And we try to create these so we can take the work off of your shoulders. So we have a wide assortment of different videos that show everything from, unzipping the software on Windows and Mac to how to download and install the software. So now we're going to pause for another quick poll. So what is your reason for attending today's webinar?
Awesome. We do have a couple questions coming in, Jasmine. This one's from Chris, and it has to go back to the safety and the computer isolation. He asks, what exactly do you mean by having the computer isolated? So
it's part of the electrical components within the hardware itself. When you're looking at a computer-aided physiology system, it will usually say if it's isolated or not. So that's just something you want to check on. Ours are all fully isolated, so that means that they're human safe and you don't have to worry about any of those concerns like shocking your students.
Perfect. All right. As far as the poll goes, about a third of the people are interested in adding computer-aided physiology systems, and about half are training to optimize the use of their computer-aided physiology system.
Great.
So we'll put it back to you.
All right. So the next segment that we're going to be discussing are the logistics and resources required to run these types of labs. So typically, people are obtaining these labs in different ways, whether that's internal funding, external funding, and sometimes, people are lucky because their university is building a new center for their lab, and they kind of get to submit their wish list of everything that they want. But a lot of times it is coming from some type of external funding. And so one of the resources you can check out are these different funding information sites: grantsnet.org, foundationcenter.org, nsf.gov, granttome.com, grants.gov, and usa.gov-grants. And for more information on this, I also recommend asking your account manager about our Biopac Student Lab Grant Toolkit, because it has a plethora of information on how people have obtained funding for these types of systems. different funding agencies that are helpful to consider when you're trying to obtain these types of systems. Of course, NSF, NIH, Howard Hughes, also WK Kellogg Foundation, Ford Motor Company, Coca-Cola Technology Grant, Microsoft, Medtronic, SBC, Ameritech. These are all places that people have received funding from before, so you can always check those out. And if you have, any other useful funding agencies, feel free to enter that in the chat and we can share them with other people. I also just wanted to share some of these tips for writing these types of grants. And this applies, to many different types of grants. But of course, you're going to identify funding agencies, which we already gave a list of. But your homework would be to find out the deadlines, because they always have a deadline. So you need to make sure that you can submit your grants on time. You also want to make sure you tell a compelling story and describe how computer-aided physiology systems would really impact student learning in your lab, whether that's promoting active and project-based learning initiatives. Is that going to give you the ability to teach in person and remotely? And is it going to add maybe a hands-on or practical lab component to your lectures? And don't forget to show your enthusiasm. These are exciting systems that are really going to be engaging for your students in the lab. And of course, it's good to have concrete examples and empirical data as evidence. And lastly, ask a colleague to review. So in grants, there's typically a portion that's called relevance and validation. And that kind of gets back to this slide having the concrete detailed examples and empirical data. And so for that, it's great to refer to publications. Of two places you can look for some publications and citations are Highwire Press, over 3,000 Biopac citations, and peer-reviewed journal publications. And also if you go to Google Scholar, you'll find more than 43,000 Biopac scholarly references. So next we're going to discuss how to choose a package for your curriculum and course format, how to create a collaborative learning environment, ways to integrate with your learning management system, and storage ideas. So if you're having a different remote, hybrid, or in-person lab, there's solutions for all of these. Biopac Student Lab offers BSL Home, which can be used remotely, hybrid, or in person, as well as our in-lab systems that you've probably heard about, and those are the ones that I showed in previous slides, and those can be worked in hybrid or in-person types of scenarios. So it's really nice if you can have, a system that's flexible in case you have to go remote. A use case example of this with Biopac Student Lab Home in remote is you can kind of see displayed on the right-hand side. And for these types of labs, you're typically going to use some type of video conferencing tools. And this is a nice option for synchronous or asynchronous labs. So you can imagine one student could be showing their webcam, running the lessons, but you also have screen sharing capability. So people can watch the data in real time, even though they're not in the same room. You could still have students working together in groups, which is really nice. Sometimes they'll all have their own Biopac Student Lab units, and sometimes they'll rotate them throughout members in the group. Biopac Student Lab is really nice for remote use because with the home units, we have options to rent or buy them. You can also have Biopac either ship the units directly to your student's home, or if the school prefers, you can have the students pick them up. And one really smart way to do that is utilizing your library. And I added this because this is something I learned from one of our BSL home users, Virginia Tech, this summer, is that they utilize their library to loan the devices. And as you can imagine, libraries already have that infrastructure in place with the serial number system, so students can easily go to the library, pick it up, and run their lessons and then return it. Now, I also know that some labs are transitioning to kind of a hybrid solution. and that's for in-person and remote students. For this type of scenario, you could have students work in a small group in the lab, and you can also combine it with remote students online. Of course, students in the lab would follow safety precautions like wearing all of the necessary protective gear like masks, and students that are remote would follow along with their BSL home units. The curriculum is all built on the same foundation, so it's really easy for the in-person students and remote students to follow along and gain the same type of learning experience. Now, for in-person, there's several different types of systems that you could use. Some people will use our Biopac Student Lab home systems because that still allows for social distancing. Since these systems were designed for remote use, they're designed so students can use them independently on their own. So you could still have students recording the lessons, even though they're not going to be in a group environment. And if you are able to have students work in a group, then the 2- and 4-channel systems are a great option. With those, there's over 65 different lessons. They were known to reduce setup time by over 90%. And they've been used over 5 million laboratory hours. And like we mentioned, now in 99% of the top 100 universities. So in the lab, one great way to make students collaborate together is by assigning roles. So one of these roles, of course, would be the subject. And they would run our lessons to record their own physiological signals. Another student could be the director. Their job would be leading the discussion, introducing the section of text to be answered, and making sure everyone participates. The detective is another potential role. They could then review the question and focus so that the group doesn't get lost down a tangent. And lastly, the clarifier, which is important. They clarify parts of the text that are hard to understand. Now, if you had a group of 4 students, they could each have one of these roles, or you can have, perhaps if you're in a smaller group, the director and detective, and kind of combine those roles together. Now, a lot of instructors, whether you're in person or remote, can really utilize your learning management system with BSL to maximize the capabilities. So one really smart way to do that is organizing the lesson materials for labs and modules. I got this example from an instructor, and she was kind enough to share one of her screencasts. So you can see here her learning management system, and she has the different lessons listed that she was planning to run, like EMG, ECG, EEG, and so on. Now within each of those modules, there's links to all of the special Biopac web pages and resources that would be helpful for the students. So this is great because your students have everything they need in one location. They're already, super familiar with going on LMS and finding all of that. Now, to grab some of these resources and place it on your LMS system, I recommend going to this web page that we have, and biopac.com/BSL home class. And this has an assortment of different videos and guides, like a quick start guide and a video showing how to start a lesson from scratch, which is really useful whether you're training yourself as an instructor or for your students who are going to be using the system on the first time. Now, some of this information is from our panel here that was in our webinar a couple months ago titled Refocus on Student Collaboration and Prioritize Hands-on Labs and Learning. So if you're interested in learning more about their perspective and how they were able to teach in lab during the pandemic or remotely with their BSL home units, I recommend scanning that QR code, and you'll be brought to a form so that you can register and watch that free and on-demand webinar. It's definitely a good one, so I recommend checking that out. So when I was a sales rep for 4 years for Biopac, one of the common questions I got from my customers were ideas like how should we store these systems, and if we had any ideas for that. And so over the years, I saw a lot of creative ways on how to accomplish this, and so I just wanted to share that with everyone. One nice way is hanging the leads and transducers, so those signal-specific accessories, on different labeled hooks in the classroom. So all of those accessories have a part number on them, and in the procedures, you'll see that we refer to that part number. So we'll say, you know, if you're doing the ECG lesson, make sure you have your general purpose lead set SS2LB. And then you can imagine you could have in your classroom a hook, and you could have all of your leads on there and then have it labeled SS2LB, so your students can just simply go and grab that when it's called for in the procedure. Another way that they're often stored is in Rubbermaid bins that you can have at each station. And those are nice, just to have everything in, you know, one contained area. And then of course you can move them onto a cart if you need to, and in the storage in like a closet. And if you're moving around a lot, one recommendation is kind of using Pelican cases. So some of our users decide that they can kind of do some extracurricular activities with their Biopac Student Lab systems, which is really nice, whether they're, you know, maybe going to a middle school and incorporating some physiology learning there, or at the high school level. And these Pelican cases just help eliminate any chance of damage if you're moving around. This is what we use when we're traveling for different demonstrations, and I can certainly say they're nice and robust, so you don't have to worry about, you know, any damage happening to your system. Another facet of storage I want to mention are for the electrodes. So electrodes are one of the disposable items related to Biopac Student Lab or any computer-aided physiology system. And they often come pre-gelled. And that gel is really important because it helps with the signal quality. And on your electrodes, you should see a sticker that looks like the one I have right here, and it will have, you know, the expiration date as well as the optimal storage. It's really nice to make sure that you have them in some type of airtight container, and that just helps with the longevity. So the expiration date is really when you're kind of expected to see the gel starting to dry out, but as long as the gel isn't dry, the electrodes will still work perfectly fine. So just an airtight container can really help with that longevity and help them from dehydrating. Now, one nice to have thing, which came from a lab that, you know, was one of those lucky professors. He found out they're building a new center, and they asked him, okay, so what's your wish list for your Biopac Student Lab classroom? And on that, he received these desks with locked drawers, and in those drawers they were the right size for storing the hardware unit as well as the leads and transducers. And so as you can imagine, the students would come in, they would see the drawers that were labeled for their classroom, so the instructor had them unlocked, and they can grab everything they need from there. Then at the end of the class, you just put them all in that drawer and lock them up. And if you have, you know, more drawers, that same classroom can be utilized by different types of labs, and everybody can keep their hardware in the specific spot that's safe. So now we're going to have our last poll of the day. Can you take this away, Colt?
Yes. So what topics should we cover in the next education webinar? Please let us know as your responses definitely guide us into what we want to, you know, present for our webinars. Another question from Chris to you, Jasmine. He asks, there was an issue with downloading the student analysis for Macs last year. He has just been wondering if that has been resolved.
Yeah, so the student analysis version is available for Macs and Windows. So your students should be able to use that on either of those platforms. And if you ever run into any hiccups, just remember that you have free, full support with Biopac Student Lab. So you can always call one of us, or even your student can, and we'll just walk them through that process.
Yeah, definitely. Our support team is amazing. Their email is support@biopac.com. Pretty simple. Feel free to reach out to them. As far as the poll goes, looks like 73% would like demonstrations on new lessons and products, and about half would like solutions for specific teaching applications.
Great.
And back to you.
That's good to know for our future webinar planning, so thanks for sharing. So next, we're going to talk about the best practices for facilitating these types of labs. So, of course, you want to relate your lab and lecture material to determine which experiments pair best with your curriculum. It's also nice to choose an integrated lab manual, make time for subject prep, experimentation analysis, and customization and the ability to create your own lessons are also great to have. So with relating labs to lecture materials, it's really helpful if you can kind of just pair your syllabus with our collection of over 65 lessons side by side. And you can work with your account manager to kind of discern, which labs would fit into your topics. And we have a wide range of different lessons. So whether you're teaching a physiology lab or exercise physiology and biomechanics, psychophys, pharmacology, human anatomy, biology, or bioengineering, and the list goes on, we have different types of lessons that fit all of those needs. So more times than not, you'll find a lab that perfectly fits with your curriculum. Many of our instructors also use an integrated lab manual, and these are nice because they add more flexibility to your BSL systems and kind of give a different view on how to use our lessons. Here I displayed the covers for all of the different integrated lab manuals that we have with Biopac Student Lab. So if any of these look familiar to you, if you already use them for your class, Biopac Student Lab would be an easy fit for you as they already have lab exercises integrated within them. Now, another concern for a lot of instructors is how do I make time for subject prep, experimentation, analysis? It seems like the length of lab time keeps getting, shorter and shorter as instructors need to accommodate more students. And we have some tools that can really help with that. One is using that free version of BSL, the Review Saved Data version that I mentioned, and that can be used before and after lab. So for example, if students don't have time to analyze their data in class, they can download this analysis RSD version, and they can then upload their data and finish their analysis where they left off at home. Another handy tip that I've learned from instructors is handing out electrodes at the door to begin subject prep. So when it comes to recording physiology signals, you typically want the electrodes on the subject for at least 5 minutes, and that gives some time for the gel to soak in on the skin, and it just really helps with the overall quality. And so if you hand out the electrodes at the door, it's starting that process pretty quick. And of course, you could just have a picture on your whiteboard or whatever it may be with where the students should place those electrodes. RSD is also really nice, the free version of the software, because it has all of those, the information like the introductions and procedures, and that's going to be helpful to have your students review before lab. And you can, utilize that information in a pre-lab quiz to make sure that they've read the procedures. And, this could be especially important for like a stimulation lab, so they know some of those caveats, like we do not want to put electrodes around the heart. You don't want to, shock the inside of your mouth, so that you know that any of those safety concerns are addressed ahead of time. We also have options to customize the lesson or create your own. So when you're creating, the ability to create your own lesson is included in all of our different packages. And so sometimes, most oftentimes, I'll see professors kind of stick to the Biopac Student Lab lessons when they first get started with us, and those are the ones that we've created. But they might have a lesson that they've always ran, and they would like to kind of create that within the Biopac Student Lab infrastructure. And you're able to do that, and you're also able to choose any of our from our 4 different amplifiers. You can pick any types of signals to collect from them since they're universal. And we have all of these presets for different signals that you can use. So you can collect data like accelerometry, data from blood pressure cuff, cardiac output, goniometer, a force transducer, the list goes on. So when you're creating your own lesson, you have lots of flexibility there. And we also have a video tutorial on how to create your own lesson. It walks you through the process really well. So if anyone is interested in that video, just mention in the chat your email and we can send you that video. There's also options to customize the lessons that we've created within Biopac Student Lab, and that's with a special license called BSL CMS, our customization license. And this is super nice because it lets you edit the instructions, videos, photos, as well as the PDF lesson introductions and procedures that we've already created and are integrated in the system. So this is all communicated through a network. So as an instructor, you would have the host computer, you could make the changes that you want, and in the lab, all the other systems that are hooked up to the same network will also display those changes made to the customization. If you want to see how that works, contact us for a demo and we can give you a walkthrough. Great. So all of these slides will be available to print as kind of a training resource, and we'll share that with you after the webinar. The webinar will, of course, also be available on our website for free and on demand. And I know that there is a lot to cover when you get started with computer-aided physiology labs, but don't forget that Biopac always has you covered. Like we mentioned, we have full support. We also have onboarding training. So any question you or your students have, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'd be happy to help guide you. Great, so now we have about 15 minutes left for question and answer section. So please feel free to answer any questions you might have in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. Also, if you have any comments to share or personal stories about maybe how you were able to obtain a grant, how you've used computer-aided physiology systems, feel free to share that because I'm sure it would be helpful to other people attending.
Yeah, we actually have some questions pouring in now. First one goes back to the electrodes for you, Jasmine. This one's from Hillary. She asks, do we have to add more gel to the electrodes, or is the gel that is already on them sufficient?
Great question. So I always recommend adding a little bit more gel, and you just kind of want to add kind of like a pea-sized amount of gel, just like your toothpaste to your toothbrush. And that once again just helps maximize the signal quality. You don't want too much gel where the electrode's going to fall off because now it's really wet. So that's why I recommend that pea-sized amount.
Cool. Jody asks, is there a time limit for support, as if they purchased a system a few years ago, do they still receive support?
Oh, 100%. And that's one of the best things I personally think about Biopac is we offer lifetime support. So whether you purchased the system a year ago or you're still using a system, from 20 years ago, we'll still offer support to you. So never be afraid to reach out. If you need some additional training, get your new staff up to pace with the systems, like we're there for you, and we can have either remote or in-person training opportunities.
Yep, awesome. Chris with another question. He is asking if you could review how instructors could get their instructor guides, like by going to the website or kind of what's the process of that?
Yeah, let me go back to that slide.
Here, let me give that I'll make you presenter again one sec.
Here, I'm just going through, oops, let me bring up the slide first and then I'll show my screen. All right. So with your system, you would have received a download link on a postcard with it that will direct you to a web page. Now on that web page, you will get, you'll see a link for the Windows and Mac. This is a screenshot exactly of what you'll see, and you'll have a form that says instructor guide and answer guide. Fill out that information and we'll send you an email with those materials. If you have a problem locating that postcard, just reach out to your account manager and we can share the instructor guide and answer guide with you.
Awesome. So they would just need that postcard to get started with that, right?
Yeah, exactly. But if you can't find it, just let us know and we can send you the instructor and answer guide separately.
All right. Another question for the pulmonary labs, are they COVID compliant?
So for the pulmonary labs, you're usually using this airflow transducer, and it does have a filter on there that filters out the bacteria. For Biopac Student Lab Home, which was developed during the pandemic, it also has a very safe kind of take to do these respiration labs, and it's not using the airflow transducer. Instead, it's using electrodes on the rib cage to get the influx from respiration from your breathing. So we have two different options that may work for you depending on your COVID requirements.
Okay, our next question goes back to the electrodes. Can the electrode gel cause rashes on the skin? Are there any alternatives if it does?
So for most people, and in my time here, I haven't really ran into people saying that it causes rashes, but if you do have someone who has extra sensitive skin, we do have electrodes for that. They're more of our neonatal pediatric electrodes that can be used for a variety of different types of recordings. We also have electrodes that have a nice hydrogel on them. And for those, you don't have to add extra gel before using. So, we probably have over 10 different types of electrodes. Most people use the general purpose electrodes that come with the Biopac Student Lab system, and they're the most cost-effective one, for buying in the masses for your students. But if you do need to have, another type of electrode for maybe a couple of students who have more sensitive skin, we do have those options for you.
That's some great info. Molly asks, can more than one lab use a single BSL system?
Definitely. So our systems can be used for, for a wide range of different curriculum. Like I mentioned, we have labs for biomedical engineering, psychophysiology, toxicology, your typical, A&P lab. So it's also a great tool set for, cross-departmental labs.
And then this is kind of a two-parter from two different people. Dan, the first question asks, how durable is the BSL? And then Tom asks, is there any warranty for the system?
Yeah, so Biopac systems are very durable. We design them for student use, so they're very robust in that way. The transducers and lead sets all have very thick cords. So even if your student, rolls over them in their rolly chair, you don't have to worry about them, breaking the cord. We have an upgrade program, and one kind of funny thing to share is sometimes we'll get these systems sent back to us and we'll look at the serial number. And we're like, wow, this was made, 20 years ago. And we talked to the instructor and they're like, yeah, it still works great. We just finally decided to upgrade. So these can really be a nice long-term investment for your lab. And warranty-wise, our warranty is covered for 5 years. But after that fact, let's say if you're one of those 20, year users, if there's something, wrong with it, maybe it needs a minor repair, you can send it back to us, and we can usually fix that and just add a minimal fee. So lots of options there as well.
That's great. A couple more questions here before we'll close up. Jody again asks, if using the home BSL and face-to-face classes and your social distancing, does each one need to be connected to a computer?
Yes, so each BSL home system needs to be connected to a computer. That's how it talks to the software via a USB cord. And so that's how you're being able to see the signal from your body on the computer screen in real time.
Cool. And our last one, this one comes from John, and it's actually a perfect segue. John asks, Biopac is real power in labeling and analyzing data. What are some good ways to learn about this in greater detail? So John, for your information here, we do have a bunch of webinars. For Acknowledge specifically, our last one, Acknowledge Bootcamp, goes through those exact steps, how to set up an experiment, how to, label channels, how to do all that. It's run by David Pollock. He's our head of support, super smart guy. And again, if anyone has any questions or needs any help with BSL or an MP system or anything, please reach out to our support team. They're very on top of it, and they'll get back to you pretty quickly. So if you just go to biopac.com/webinars, you'll see a myriad of webinars, not only for Acknowledge, we have best practice for good data, certain signals, anything you can really think of. Pull this up here. Cool, yeah, so again, live and on-demand webinars, biopac.com/webinars. We have live webinars every month. We have a couple of exciting ones coming down the chute here. One will focus again on virtual reality, and then another one on how to set up an MP160 system, which will be good if you kind of need a refresher. And last but not least, as a reminder, today's webinar was recorded. We're going to be sending you guys an email with the link of the recording. And then probably next week, you'll get the slides and a Q&A document with more of your questions and answers. And then we will also submit any videos to you if you guys have requested that. That'll probably either be later today or tomorrow. When you guys close out of the webinar window, you will see a survey. Please, please, please complete it so we can have your feedback. We use it when we, try to create new webinars, and if we need to change or tweak anything. So your feedback is always appreciated. You may visit biopac.com for additional references. We have screencasts on specific features and analysis tools. We have application notes providing step-by-step instructions, and we have information about upcoming webinars and events or past webinars. Jasmine, is there anything else you would like to add before we conclude?
No, just thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful start to the new year.
Yes, definitely. Happy New Year, everyone. This is going to conclude our webinar. Thank you again for attending. Have a great day, and goodbye.